Got it. Okay, let's begin. Today we're going to do two aliyot, not one aliyah. Actually, the first and the second, because in Parshas Vayishlach, it's really one story. So we're going to do both aliyot. We'll get all the way to Shlishi. So if you have a chumash in front of you, let's begin. Page 170, Vayishlach Perek Lamed Beis Pasuk Daled. Okay, let's read the text and then begin. Vayishlach Yaakov malachim lefanav el Esav achiv, and Yaakov sends messengers before him to Esav his brother. Arzo Seir Sidei Adam, he sends him to the field to Seir in the field of Edom. Vayitzav tam leimor, so he tells these messengers the following: Kos amru la'adoni le'Esav. This is what I want you to tell my master Esav. Kol amar avdachah Yaakov im Lavan garti eichar ad ata. And he says, I want you to tell him I have been living with Lavan, and that's where I have been sojourning until now. Vayhi shor v'chamor tzon ve'eved shicha ve'eshlucha la'agid la'adoni limso chen beinecha. I have acquired quite a bit of possessions. I've acquired donkeys, flocks, servants, and maidservants. And I'm sending to you, my Lord. He keeps on calling him my Lord. I'm sending you to my Lord this, and I hope it'll find favor in your eyes. He's sending him gifts, right? Now the angels did this message and brought the gifts. Now they return to Yaakov and they say, Banu el achicha el Esav. We came and we found your brother. We found Esav. The Gamo lech likrascha. By the way, you should know he's not alone. He has 400 men with him. And Yaakov became very frightened and very distressed. Not just frightened, but distressed. And he immediately did what? He divided all that were with him into two different camps, including the flocks, the cattle, the camels, the people, and the flocks, the camels, all of his possessions. So he divides them into two camps. Vayomer, and he explains why he's doing it. If Esav should attack and hurt us, at least he'll attack. If you have two different camps, he only can attack one camp at a time. He'll attack one, and the other will escape. The other camp will escape. In other words, we're not going to be all in the same place at the same time, so we won't all be annihilated. Vayomer Yaakov, Elohei avi Avraham, Elohei avi Yitzchak, Hashem omer elai, shuv la'artzecha l'ma'adecha ve'tiva imach. And then Yaakov said, God of my father Avraham and God of my father Yitzchak, Hashem, who said to me, return to your land and to your relatives, and I will do good with you. Katonti mikol hachasadim, umikol ha'emes asher asises avdecha. Kivimakli avarti asayadin azevato yisol lishnei machanos. He turns to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and he says, I've been diminished by all the kindness. I'm really a small person in everything that you've done. I didn't deserve, what he's saying is, I didn't deserve all of this. The truth is that you've done for me great things. Look, I left with just a staff in my hand when I crossed the Yarden. Now look, I've become two camps. Quite impressive, in other words. Hatzileni no, but then he turns to God. Hatzileni no miyad miyad Esav. I'm turning to you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and I said, please save me from Esav, from my brother. Right? He says, I'm begging you to save me. He's very worried that he's going to lose everything. He's now worried. And he says, but you said to me, Hashem, I will surely do good with you, and I will make your offspring like the sand of the sea, which is too numerous to count. In other words, it doesn't really, what's he saying to Hashem? It doesn't really make sense that I should die at this moment. You promised me, and all of the things I can't deny have been phenomenal. I left with just a staff in my hand. I'm now returning, look, with a big family. I can divide them into two camps. Look at all the possessions, but it looks like it might be the end. And this doesn't make sense. So then that's the end of the first. And Yaakov spends the night, he goes to sleep, right? He settles down, he goes to sleep, but he sends a gift to Esav. Izim matayim, utiashim esrim, rechelim matayim, be'elim esrim. We're told exactly how many animals he's sending to. He's sending 20 of this, 20 of that, 20 of that. Malim menikot of nehem shloshim parot arba'a arba'im uparim asara atonot esrim ba'yarim asara. He sends 40 of this, 10 of this. He's sending a lot of possessions, a lot of camel, a lot of flock. Vayitem bi'arav adov, eder levado, vayomer alav adov, ivu lefonai v'revach tasimu ben eder. He put his servants in charge. Each drove separately and said to his servants, pass on ahead of me and leave a space between your drove and this drove. In other words, he's dividing them. He's making sure everything is all set. And he says to the first one the following. He gives the first one, the one who's leading the pack. He prepares them. He says, I want you to know when you encounter Esav, he's going to ask you a bunch of questions. And these are the questions that he's going to ask you. He's going to say, when my brother Esav meets you and he asks you, saying, who are you? Whose are you? Where are you going? And whose are these that are before you? What shall you say? You shall answer, your servant Yaakov. It's a tribute sent, it's a gift sent from my Lord to Esav. And by the way, Yaakov is right behind us. Remember, he's divided them. So he says to the second one, to the third one, every one of you is going to be asked the same questions, and every one of you is now prepared to give the same answers. And you shall say, and Yaakov is behind us. And you shall say to him, moreover, behold, your servant Yaakov is behind us. For he said, I will appease him with his tribute that precedes me, and afterwards I will face him. Perhaps he will forgive me. Pasuk Chav Beis, verse 22. And he got up that night and he took, right? He got up that night and he, So the tribute passed on before him. Well, he spent that night in the camp. Okay. Pasuk Chav Gimel. Hayakam balayla ahu, hayikach et shtei nashav et shtei shivchotav et achad asar yuladav, hayavor et ma'avar yavod. And he got up, he had gone to sleep, but in the middle of the night, what did he do? He got up in the night, he took his two wives, his two handmaids, right? And it's 11 sons because Binyamin is not born yet. And he crosses Ma'avor Ya'abod. This is the water pass, so now he crosses. He makes sure that everybody gets crossed the Nachal, the water, and he sends them over with his possessions. And that's the night where he has the battle, right? And Yaakov is left alone now. He's taken everybody across. He's been going back and forth across the riverbed. And now Vayivater Yaakov levado, and Yaakov was left alone. And suddenly a man, we don't know who this man is, wrestles with him until sunrise, until the break of dawn. Not sunrise, really dawn, till dawn. By that 72 minutes before sunrise. Vayar, kilo yacholo, vayigat bechaf yireicho. When the man perceived that he could not defeat Yaakov, what does he do? He strikes him in his hip, in his kaf yireicho, in his hip. Ateka kaf yerech Yaakov, behevavko imo. And what does he do? So Yaakov's hip socket is dislocated as he wrestled with him. Now Yaakov's going to limp. And this man says to Yaakov, Yaakov has wrestled him and Yaakov has been victorious. He says to Yaakov, he says, dawn has arrived, let me go. I'm not letting you go until you bless me. Whoever this person is, we know nothing about him. And now Yaakov turns to me and says, what's your name? I'm sorry, this man, right? This person, whoever this is, this being, whoever this is, turns to Yaakov and he says, "You want to be blessed? Tell me, what's your name?" He says, "My name's Yaakov." Lo Yaakov, Yamer Od Shimcha, Kim Yisrael. You're not going to be called Yaakov anymore. Your new name is Yisrael. Why? For you have battled against, you've wrestled against with God and with man, and you have been victorious. Now Yaakov asks, Yishal Yaakov, Ayomer, Agida Nashnecha. Yaakov turns and says, "Who are you? Tell me your name." Why are you asking me my name? What does it mean to you? What do you need to know this? And he blesses them there. He blesses Yaakov there. And that's the end of the story. Yaakov asks his name. He doesn't get his name. This end of the story. End. E-N-D. That's the way the story ends. Okay, let's go back. We've got a lot to learn here.
And his name is Yisrael?
Now Yaakov gets two names, right? Yaakov and Yisrael. Yaakov and Yisrael. This is the first time that Yaakov is now going to be called really Yisrael. And we're told why. Yisrael is the one who wrestles with Hashem and wrestles with man, and he's victorious.
He's the only one that once the name is changed.
He also uses the old name, right? Avram is never called Avram after that. He's always called Avraham, right? Sarai is never called Sarai after her name's changed. It's called Sarah. Okay, let's take a look at how Rav Soloveitchik understands to learn these psukim, these two aliyot, which is really one aliyah. I mean, one thing, one story. So Rav Soloveitchik notes that these psukim are really a text to teach us how we deal with confronting our enemies. It's a lesson in confronting our enemies. He quotes the Ramban. The Ramban says Sefer Bereshit is called by our sages by the title Sefer HaSimanim. What does Sefer HaSimanim mean? It's the book that teaches you how to act. It gives you the guide in how to act in life. That's what Sefer Bereshit is all about. Maaseh Avot Siman Labanim. The way the forefathers acted became a siman, a guide in how we're to act. Actually, this is based on a medrash. The medrash says, in particular on this parsha, it says Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, famous redactor of the Mishnah, Rebbe HaKadosh, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, never went to Rome without first studying this parsha. He'd had to often go to Rome to represent the Jewish community to the Roman government who was in control at that time. They were the power of the world at that time. He would never go to Rome on behalf of the Jewish people without first reading Vayishlach all over again. Why? Because this was the blueprint on how you deal with your enemy, We're going to do something that we haven't done yet until now, and that is not one aliyah, but two aliyahs, as I've just read to you, because it's really one story. So let's see, Rav Soloveitchik wants to know, what is the Torah telling us and how do we deal with our enemy? Vayishlach Yaakov malachim lefanav. You know what bothers Rav Soloveitchik here? He says, one word in this pasuk is crucial to the whole story. It's the word lefanav. What in Vayishlach Yaakov malachim lefanav? And Yaakov sent angels ahead of him. Lefanav, ahead of him, as if the angels were leading him. We have a pasuk where Moshe Rabbeinu in Chumash Bamidbar sends messengers also to King Edom in Kadesh, from Kadesh. And the pasuk is identical. Instead of Yaakov, it says Moshe, but the word lefanav is not there. Before him, he sent angels before him. Simple answer is that Yaakov sent angels. Moshe sent people. What's the point that Rav Soloveitchik is making? Oh, Yaakov is sending angels. Yaakov is not only representing here, if you will, it's according to Rashi, and the Rav quotes it, which angels is he sending? The same angels that 20 years ago he met going up and down a ladder, correct? It's the same angels that have now reappeared. These are the angels that helped him on his trip, and these are the angels that reappear that are going to guide him. Perhaps what this really means is the state That's what Soloveitchik understands. It's you see the state of mind of Yaakov. He was frightened. He was frightened when he left to Lavan, wasn't he? He was worried out of his wits. How am I going to remember the trauma? We talked about that last week. The trauma of how am I going to be able to replant the society, the holy society of Avram and Yitzchak in Haran, in the city of Lavan. Can I do it? Or maybe no, Judaism only can thrive in a geographic area called Eretz Yisrael. He was frightened by that. HaKadosh Baruch Hu meets him on the way. He has a prophecy, he has a dream, and he meets him on the way. And he says to him, no, Malachim are going up and down. Don't worry, you can take Torah everywhere. You can take it to the moon. You'll be able to go anywhere with the Torah. You can transplant it everywhere. Torah is mobile, and you're not going to have a problem. So they were the angels that left him then with his fear. Now, 20 years later, what's his fear? He's going to encounter Esav, and Esav is going to do what? Revenge and wipe him out. Who's going to help Yaakov? Who helped him 20 years ago? Only his dream, only his nevuah, only the malachim, only his belief in God. It boils down to an emunah in God. The angels represent the emunah in God. He got through the 20 years with Lavan because he had a strong emunah. How is he now going to once again encounter a new fear and overcome it? His emunah. And that's what the angels represent. The same angels that left him, that went with him, that escorted him out of Eretz Yisrael are the same angels that are now welcoming him back. And both times there's trauma. Both times there's fear. And the only way he overcomes it is because he realizes HaKadosh Baruch Hu is at his side. What are the malachim representing? The presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in his life. An emunah, a deep set faith. That's what he means. Yet Moshe, it's not a question of faith at that time. Moshe, it's a pragmatic war. He sends, so he doesn't have to say the word lefanav. Here, it's who's guiding Yaakov. It's more than just a battle. It's more than just an encounter with somebody, namely Esau. What is it? It's a question of the battle of spirits, the battle of can he conquer Esau? And yes, he can if he has an emunah, which he has. Continue on. It says, okay, Al Esav Achiv. Where does he send to Esau? Where's Esau? The Torah doesn't just say he's in Stay Edom. It says Arza Seir Sedei Edom. It underlines it. So you want to know where Esau is? I'll tell you where Esau is. Where is Esau? He's not in Eretz Yisrael. He's not in Eretz Yisrael. That's what's important. He's totally out. You could have simply said, if you're writing this pasuk, you could have said, Vayishlach Yaakov malachim lefanav le'esav achiv sedei Edom. No, it says Arza Seir sedei Edom, underlining exactly where you are. You're not only in Los Angeles, you're at 9317 Pico. But I can tell you, where's Muskin? Well, Muskin's in Los Angeles. Or no, Muskin is at 9317 West. Which one is more identifying where I really am? The 9317 West Pico. Oh, that's what's happening here. Arza Seir Sedei Edom, it's double language. It's to make sure you know where he is. Where is he? Not in Eretz Yisrael. Because what does Yaakov battle Esau over to this very day? Who has the right to a little piece of geography called the Holy Land in Israel? The world has all of this land. It doesn't matter how many square miles is this little land. And we're still battling with it to this very day. Esau, it's not yours. I was promised, of all the things, I was promised Eretz Yisrael. Eretz Yisrael is non-negotiable. That's what he's pointing out in these words. That's why it says Yaakov is not only encountering an Esau as a personality, Yaakov's encountering a historic, here you got it, a historic battle that is still raging to this very day. Let's continue on. Vayitzav otam lemor, right? And so he tells them the following. Yitzav otam lemor, ko tamru ladoni le'esav. So he sends these angels, right, to Esau. And they're told what to say. Ko amar avdecha Yaakov. Im Lovon Garti, Va'ichar Arata. In Lovon Garti. With Lovon, I Garti. Garti, what does it mean? Ger. The shoresh is ger. What's ger mean? A foreigner. How many years was he in Lavan's house? 20 years. When do you get a passport? When do you get a right to be a citizen? So the Gemara tells us in Baba Kama, the Gemara gives you exactly how many, 30 days and then 12 months. When do you have to start really paying taxes and being considered a citizen? And you have to take responsibility. After 12 months, you're already, without a question of a doubt, a citizen. What's he telling him? After 20 years, I didn't accept my citizenship. Esav, I want you to know, I went to our Uncle Lavan. I remained a stranger all that time. I never accepted the citizenship documents. I never became more than an outsider. I never ever accepted my destiny to be in Haran. That wasn't my destiny. Where he's letting Esav know, don't think just because I left for 20 years, I became a citizen in Haran. I never accepted. In Lavan Garti, there was a second message that Yaakov is imparting to Esav. Rashi notes it based on the Medrash. Garti is an interesting word. If you rearrange the letters, you get Taryag, right? In Lavan Garti, the Taryag Shamarti is the famous words of Rashi, right? In Lavan Garti, in Lavan I lived, but changed the letters around, rearranged the letters, the same letters. Gimel Reish, Tov Yud, turns into Tov Reish, Yud Gimel, the same letters. Taryag. Taryag is 613. What is 613? What's he telling Esav? Number one, he told Esav, I never became a citizen. Eretz Yisrael is my destiny. My dear friend Esav, this is not your land. You're in Seir. You're in Edom. That's where your land is. I get Eretz Yisrael. You don't. Number one. Number two, what else is he telling them? That's correct. Which is what? What do you mean I kept the mitzvahs? He's telling them, I never accepted the moral compass of our uncle. That wasn't what guided me. I never abandoned Bris Shel Avraham Avinu. I kept what Grandpa taught us. I kept what Dad taught us. I kept the moral guide, the moral compass of our grandfather and our father. I never adopted, not only did I remain a stranger, I never accepted a passport or a citizenship. What else didn't I do? I never accepted his style of life either. Their style of life was not my style of life. That was what he was telling them. That is crucial. I never abandoned the covenant of Avram Avinu. Rav Soloveitchik goes one step further. He says, who else in Tanakh, in Bereshit, experiences this kind of an experience? Yaakov's favorite son, Yosef. But the lessons are different. Yosef also goes into exile, doesn't he? Yosef also has to live 20 years away from his family, right? But it's different. Yaakov and Yosef have totally different experiences. What is the difference? Number one, Yaakov proves that Torah is realizable in poverty and oppression. Yaakov leaves with what? With nothing. He goes and he remains poor. He has to sell himself for 7 years for this daughter, another 7 years for this daughter. He's a slave, right? Yaakov teaches us Torah can be successful in a place of poverty. That's the lesson Yaakov teaches us. What does Yosef teach us? Yosef demonstrates that the Bris Avraham can be successful in the place of power and success. Wealth, they're opposite. Yaakov teaches us, as the Rav points out, it can be successful in poverty. Yosef teaches us it can be successful in wealth. Yaakov, number two. Yaakov demonstrates his loyal.
When he was in jail,
Yeah.
and they came to us.
But he
said, God.
right, 100%. But Yaakov represents that, and Yaakov represents the success of Torah in confronting poverty. Yosef represents the success of Torah confronting success, power. Yosef is the ultimate in power, right? Okay, Yosef gets the crown of Malchus. Okay, Yaakov, number 2. Yaakov demonstrates his loyal heroism in a backward society. Haran is a pastoral setting. It's not only poor, but it's backward. Haran wasn't the place that you wanted to go if you were interested in being in the place of growth. Where was the seat of technology of its time? Egypt. Yosef demonstrates his heroism in the most advanced civilization of its time. Yaakov represents it going to the backwards part of the world, and Yosef represents it in the center of the most developed civilization. In other words, you see what the Rav is pointing out. The father and the son experience both exiles, but they demonstrate something different. Yaakov is demonstrating, one, it can succeed in poverty. Yosef demonstrates it can succeed in power and wealth. Yaakov represents it can be taken to the backward countries. Yosef represents it can be taken to the center of all civilization. Both succeed. What's the point? Torah is mobile. When I was a kid in elementary school, or was it high school? I don't remember either. It was junior high or high school. I had a Rebbe, I'm trying to remember. It was high school. It was early high school. It was ninth grade. And my Rebbe said the following. He said, if you can't realize that Torah is mobile, you will not succeed. And in other words, if you can't pick up that shas and carry it with you, if it becomes so heavy and you don't want to leave town because of what you own, oh, I have my leather-bound shas, I have my this, I have my that, and you're not willing to leave when you gotta leave, what happens? You disappear. You get caught up in the Holocaust. He says, you got to be able to know Torah is mobile. That's lesson number 1 in this story. Lesson number 1 in this story is Torah is mobile. Continues on. Then the Rav goes, so what happens? What's the next most important pasuk here? Page 172, pasuk ches. Vayira Yaakov ma'od vayetzer lo. Right? And Yaakov becomes frightened. What does he become frightened of? What's his fear? And what's his distress? 2 different words for fear. He's fearful and he's distressed and he's traumatized. What is he fearful and what is he traumatized? And it's incongruous if you think about it. Didn't we just say Yaakov is successful because Yaakov is a man of faith? If Yaakov is a man of faith, what is he so fearful for? The Rav notes that it's teaching us, number 1, it's teaching us a very important lesson over miracles, pertaining to miracles. Yaakov knows that no miracle will happen until what? Until you have exhausted all of the natural process. He still has to exhaust all the natural process. You can't just sit back and pray, God, bring me a miracle. You know the famous story about the guy sitting on the roof, right? As the city floods, and they send the boats and they send the plane, and he just sits there and he says, God, save me, God, save me, God, save me. And now the water is now about ready to kill him. And he says, God, I prayed to you. Why didn't you send? He says, idiot, I sent you, but you got to get into the boat. You got to get onto the plane. You got to do your part. That's number 1. Number 1, Yaakov doesn't just pray for a miracle. Yaakov knows, I got to do what I got to do, right? I have to exhaust all the natural. Once I've done my part, then HaKadosh Baruch Hu will do his part. If this is the case, then why did Yaakov send the angels to Esau in the first place? Why did he send the angels to Esau? He sent them angels. Why did he send the angels? So Soloveitchik says he was doing something else. He was playing psychological warfare with Esau. Yaakov is brilliant. Yaakov uses every natural and pragmatic approach before he prays for miracles. He plays a psychological warfare with Esau. Esau also grew up in the house of Avraham and Yitzchak. Esau knew what angels looked like. He saw them in Avraham and Yitzchak's house. He saw them in Grandpa's house. He saw them in his father's house. He knew darn well. So you know what Yaakov sends? Yaakov's playing, if you will, these are my words, the psychological warfare. He's trying to wake him up, and he's saying, Esau, does this not remind you of your childhood? Are you willing to destroy your childhood? And I was part of your childhood. I'm your brother. Are you going to wipe me out? The angels are to remind him. Yaakov is sending to Esau. Think back 20 years. Who am I? Where are you from? We're from the same bloodline. And we all came from the same kind of a home. That's why he's sending him. What's the Vayitzer lo? So he's fearful. I get it. He's fearful that Yaakov and Esau are going to have this terrible battle now, right? And he wants to be successful. He doesn't want it to end on a battlefield. What's the Vayitzer lo? What's the distress over? He's fearful that there's going to be a war. But what's the distress over? So Rashi suggests that Vayira means he's fearful that Esau will kill him. Vayetzer, he's fearful that he will kill Esau. Everybody's hearing me? He has a fear that Esau will kill him, and the distress is no, Esau won't kill him, he'll kill Esau. What does that mean? He was afraid that the battle is not just, he understood, the battle is not just Yaakov and Esau as individuals. Yaakov realized right now that what he is experiencing, he's experiencing Jewish history for eternity. That's what he realized. He says, it's going to continue. This battle with Esau is not going to end here on this battlefield. This battle with Yaakov and Esau, Yaakov represents Klal Yisrael, Esau represents the Gentile world, and this battle is going to go on until the Messianic age. This is motivating Yaakov.
Rabbi Muskin, why did he
Yes.
mention your brother and Esau in the same sentence? What, isn't that duplicity?
So that Rashi deals with that. Rav Soloveitchik is not interested in that in his overall view. Remember, Rav Soloveitchik is trying to build a perspective of what is the Chumash teaching you? That's a valid question. I'm not arguing if you're learning word for word in every pasuk, but I'm not learning word for word. I'm giving you the gestalt picture of what Rav Soloveitchik is teaching. And Rav Soloveitchik is teaching us that this story is a story about how we handle our enemies. How do we prepare from our confrontation with our enemies? And Rav Soloveitchik is noting that Yaakov, it dawns upon Yaakov right now that the battle is not just him and Esau. It's not one individual against another individual. It's Jewish history. It's eternity. Okay? And what is he worried about? He's worried that he's going to have to harm Esau. And that bothers him even more than even losing his own life. And we all remember the words of Golda Meir. Golda Meir said, I can forgive the Egyptians for killing my sons, but what I cannot forgive them is for making our sons killers, for making our sons kill their sons, right? That I can't forgive them for. In other words, Hayadayim Yadei Esau. The hands are the hands of Esau. We don't want to know how to pull the trigger. We don't want it. We'll know it to defend ourselves. We don't want it. So somebody just told me they went off for the first time to a shooting range. They said they picked up the gun. They were shaking. It's not so easy pulling the trigger the first time, is it? It was just that, God forbid, it was target practice. He said it was so hard. He was shaking. His hand was, but you realize that a gun, who wants to deal with a gun? That's not, by Yadayim Yadei Esau, that's not our culture. We don't want to know of it. But if we need to know of it, we'll know it. We'll have the Hesder Yeshiva Bacher who knows how to carry the Gemara under one hand and the Sayib, the knife, the battle, the gun, right, in the other hand. 100%. But that's the Vayitzer. Vayar, right? He has a fear and he has a distress. The distress is, God forbid I should have to kill you. Continues on. Go to Pasuk Yud Beis. And now he says, next thing, he turns to God, and Yaakov is turning to God. He said, save me from Esav, right? Kiarei anochi oto, right? Here he says, Kiarei anochi oto, for I fear that lest he come and strike me down. Kiarei anochi oto, for I fear. The Rav notes that Avram defeated the 4 kings against the 5 kings back in Parshas Lech Lecha. And what was he worried about? He was worried that he defeated the 4 kings, that the 4 kings would regroup and come and take revenge. So what does HaKadosh Baruch Hu say back in Lech Lecha, in Perek Tesvav, Pasuk Aleph? Al tira. Yaakov, Avram, don't worry. I got your back. They're not going to hurt you. Moshe expresses the fear when going to battle against Og, king of Bashan, in Bamidbar, Perek Chof Aleph, Pasuk Lamed Gimel, that they will take revenge. God says, Al tira, don't worry. Al tira. Why doesn't he say that to Yaakov? Yaakov, don't worry. You're going to battle, but don't worry. He never tells Yaakov, don't worry. You hear what I'm saying? Avram, he's told, don't worry. You're going to battle, don't worry. There'll be no revenge. Moshe, you're going to battle, don't worry. There'll be no revenge. Yaakov, you're going to battle. Where's the Al Tira? It's a brilliant question. Where's the Al Tira? Why doesn't God tell Yaakov? Yaakov, don't worry. Everything's going to be fine. He doesn't tell that ever in this whole conversation. Yaakov is never placated by God. You notice that? Yaakov is never placated in this story by God. God never comes to him in a dream and says, don't worry, God, don't worry. Yaakov, you're going to get out of this. Esav is not going to harm you. He's going to go his way. You know the end of the story. Esav goes one way. He goes the other way for the moment. Why not? Because this is not a story of just Yaakov and Esav. This is a story of Jewish history. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows all too well that it's not always going to turn out that we're going to be victorious. We're going to lose a lot of people along the way. We're not always going to win. We might win at the very end, but along the way, we're going to pay a high price. The Al Tira is not here because it's not just Yaakov and Esav. It's Yaakov representing Bnei Yisrael. It's Esav representing the Gentile world. And in this battle, we're still fighting it, aren't we? If anybody teaches you that there will be no anti-Semitism will be wiped off the map, they're lying. They're lying. That's what the Rav points out. And God can't promise Yaakov because Yaakov represents whom? Us. Represents, and that, the Rav notes, that conflict continues to this very day. So now, he's going to meet Esau. How does he prepare for Esau? Let's take a look. Pasuk Yudalet. He's going to meet him, right? Vayolen Sham, verse 14. Vayolen Sham balaylahu. He lays down for the night. He's settling down, okay? Vayikach min haba biyado mincha le'esav achi. But before he goes to sleep, what does he do? He prepares the gift he's going to send now to Esau. Vayikach min haba biyado. And he prepares that which he has in his hands, a gift to Esau, his brother. The Yalkut Shimoni notes that Yaakov offered as a gift to Esau that which he had in his hands. Vayikach min haba biyado. What do you mean? And he gave him that which was in his hands. It means, the Yalkut says, Yaakov was willing to give him his precious stones. Remember, Yaakov leaves Lavan. He comes to Lavan with what? Just a staff in his hand. He leaves Lavan, a very wealthy man. He has precious stones. He has pearls. The Yalkut says Vayikach min haba biyado. He's willing to give to Esau all of his wealth. All of his wealth. He's giving him precious stones. He's giving him pearls. Yaakov also sent, as we see, all of these animals, 40 of this, 20 of this, 10 of this. Animals were like sending him a fleet of cars. He's sending him Mercedes and Jaguars and Bentleys and all of the good ones, right? He was sending him, that would be if you updated it today, right? He's sending him private jets. That's what he was sending him. He was sending him the most expensive items in the world of its time. Correct? Why is he willing to do that? Listen to what Rav Soloveitchik says. This is very important to understand the whole story here. He says it's not by accident. Not by accident. The Jew has always been willing to part with his possessions if this will help him gain freedom, if this will help him avoid edicts, if this will help him avoid expulsion from countries, he'll pay. If this will get freedom from prison, we'll get somebody out of prison, we'll pay whatever we need to pay. We'll give it all. You know all of these stories. You know it better than I, right? Where families literally gave up everything to get out of Europe during the Holocaust. Before the Holocaust, they just packed their bag. Goodbye. The possessions, we'll regain them in another country. The possessions, we just use them for our freedom. That's all we need, right? What our Chazal understood it to mean when the Torah says, Minabah biyado, it's all of those precious possessions. They're everyday possessions. They're goods. They come today, they're gone tomorrow. We don't care about that. Yaakov taught us that. But when, through the generations, Esau says, I want your sacred possessions, then the battle is on. You want my minabah biyado, what I own, my pearls, my stones, my animals, my cars, my jets, you want my sacred possessions? Oh no. When Esau demands Yaakov to compromise on his Torah commitment, you're not to celebrate Shabbos anymore. Oh no, you're not. I'm teaching on Friday night during the winter months. Just during the winter months. It's a long winter. So after Kabbalah Shabbos, before we do Ma'ariv, for 5-7 minutes every year, I choose a different topic and we go through interesting topics within that topic. So this year, I just started last Shabbos. It was the first Shabbos of the winter. So last year was Kiddush. This year it's Neiros Shabbos. Neiros Shabbos, right? Adlakas ner, that you light candles before Shabbos. Do you know the non-Jews always associated with the Jews lighting candles on Friday night? That custom represented the Jewish family in the non-Jewish thinking. We have documentation from the first century of the Common Era, a Roman philosopher who was bitterly opposed to Judaism. He wanted to wipe out Judaism and Judaism's impact on the world of its time. And what does he pick on? We should forbid anybody to light candles on Friday night. For the gods do not need our illumination. That's what he writes. The gods do not need our illumination. Who was he attacking us? Who was he attacking? He was attacking the Jews. I forget the name, it just evades me right now. Who was a very famous Roman philosopher whose purpose was to stop the Jew from acting like a Jew in the sacred confines of his home. When you do that, what does the Jew do? He fights back. Yaakov becomes heroic. Suddenly, Yaakov becomes so strong, nothing can stop him. He becomes a hero fighting for his beliefs. His answer to Esau is, as long as you want the profane in my life, you got it. You want the sacred? I'll fight you tooth and nail. That's what's Vayikach min haba biyado mincha le'esav alpi. I'll give to my brother my possessions, but I'm not giving to my brother that which is sacred to me. Continue on. Let's jump now to Posuk Yud Ches. And what's the next point that Rav Soloveitchik learns? He says, okay, what happens here? Now Yaakov is preparing his messengers to go now and to meet Esau. He says, you're taking these gifts, but let me tell you what's going to happen. Esau is going to ask you 3 questions. Let's take a look in Pasuk Yitches. Hayitzavet harishon lemor, ki yifkashecha Esav achi, u'she'elecha lemor. When you meet up with him, he's going to ask you. Now, point out the questions. Lemi ata,
Who are you?
v'ano telech, u'lemi ele lefanecha. 3 questions. Let's see how Rabbi Soloveitchik understands these questions. Lemi ata, and it means, to whom do you belong? Esau is going to ask, you're the messengers, you're the representatives of my brother. I want to know who you are. I want lemi ata. Who do you belong to? To whom is your metaphysical commitment? Where is your soul committed? As spiritual beings, who are you? And to whom do you belong? Question 1. Tell me about your religious view on life. That's the first question Esav is going to ask. The second question, v'ana telech. You know what v'ana telech means? Where are you going? This means, to whom is your historical destiny associated with? To whom have you consecrated your future, Rabbi Soloveitchik writes? What is your final objective? Or put simply, who is your God and what is your way of life? That's question number 2. These first 2 questions, they're related to the spiritual journey of the Jew, the spiritual journey of the members of the covenantal community of Avraham and Yitzhak. What's the answer? These belong exclusively to Yud Kei Vav Kei. That's our answer. But then there is a final question. Ulemi eile lefanecha. And for who are these before you? And Rabbi Soloveitchik understands this 3rd question as follows. This question is totally different. Esau is asking us, are you ready to contribute your talents, your capabilities, your efforts towards the welfare of general society? Are you willing to pay your portion of the taxes and to develop the country that you're going to live in with me? This question is not spiritual. This question is pragmatic, it's political. What's our answer? Oh, yes, we're willing to do everything in our capability to donate to society. And isn't that what the Jew does in every country he goes to? He helps the society thrive. And wherever he was, the society thrived. As soon as he was exiled, what happened to the society? The society collapses. The society collapses. The famous example is Spain. Spain was the power of its world until the Jew was expelled in 1492. With the Jew being expelled in 1492, suddenly Spain declines. Every country where the Jew was, it was a major powerhouse. You got rid of the Jew because the Jew committed himself to helping the society he lived in. He was more German than the German. He was more Spanish than the Spanish. He was more, right? He was devoted, more American than the American. That we know. So 3 questions. 2 of them are spiritual. 1 is political, is pragmatic. The 2 spiritual, what is our answer? Sorry, we're committed to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Tell that to Esau straight out. And we saw it already in the words in Lavan Garti, right? Now he's delineating it. In Lavan Garti, I lived with him as a stranger. And what does that mean? I'll show you now what that means. Don't misunderstand Esau. This is what we're going to do. It's this 3rd question that now continue on. The next pasuk in your test, page 174. And you shall say, your servant Yaakov has sent you a gift. For the 3rd question, here it is. First 2 questions, no gift. The 3rd question, Ulami eile lefanecha, that are you willing to join the community? Oh, yes. Here's my taxes. Here's what I'm willing to do. That's how the Rav understands it. Then he goes on. Next pasuk, your test. Mincha hi shlucha lefanav. All the physical blessings in the world Yaakov is willing to give to Esau. Right? Yaakov, however, Yaakov told Esau, and he told him, he said, by the way, he said, Yaakov says to Esau, you're angry at me. Why? Because I took the bracha away from you. It was destined for you, and I took it away from you. Guess what, Esau? You never lost the bracha. I never got that bracha. The bracha that you thought I took away from you, it always remained with you. It was always yours. How do I know that? Because I never got the blessings of the physical gifts. You got the blessings of the physical gifts. They're yours. That's not my possession. My possession is, there is a second bracha. What was the second bracha? The second bracha is in Perek Chavches, Pasuk Dalid. Go back. Perek Chavches, Pasuk Dalid. Go back to Parjas Toldos. Page 142. After he takes the blessing away from Esau, and then Esau enters, and Esau realizes what happens. And he cries to Yaakov, to Yitzchak, and he says, Daddy, give me a bracha. Daddy gives him a bracha. He gives him the bracha of what? No, he gives Esau the bracha of what? Mitala Shamayim and Shmani Aretz. You're going to get all of the blessings of the physical blessings of the world. Esau got that. But now take a look in Pasuk Dalet. But to Yaakov, what does Yaakov get? The covenant of Abraham, who's that given to?
Yaakov.
Esau never got that. Now, what's happening? Yaakov is telling Esau, you said I stole the bracha from you. I never benefited from it. It's all yours. That you got. But Birkas Avram, I did get, and Birkas Avram, I'm going to retain. And part of Birkas Avram is Eretz Yisrael. I'm going to retain Eretz Yisrael. That he's told. Continue on. Now, a few more psukim, he goes on to Pasuk Chav Beis. What happens now? This is the introduction to the wrestling match. And now he settles down for the night and he sleeps. It wasn't only Yaakov who went through the dark night. Remember, it's not only Yaakov, Rav Soloveitchik understands. It's Jewish history of the Jew going through the pogroms and the ghettos and all of the dark nights of history, right? And he was unprotected and he had no rights. The Jew has had no rights. What's fascinating about this whole story of Yaakov is it begins with a dream and it ends with a dream, right? It began 20 years before with a dream and it's ending with a dream right now. What's the dream? He's wrestling with according to the Rambam, this is all a nevuah. He doesn't, there's no man per se, according to the Rambam, that understands. How does he understand the story of the wrestling match? It was a nevuah. It wasn't a physical wrestling, because he does, which can happen in a nevuah. That he does. That he's impacted by this. He's totally impacted. Yaakov would never have been able to confront and survive Lavan without having that nevuah, and he's not able to confront and survive Esau without having this nevuah.
I just want. What about Shem and Ever? Didn't he study at Shem and Ever before confronting Lavan, before entering Lavan's house? He prepared.
That's the Medrash. The Medrash says yes, which only supports this very idea that he prepares accordingly, 100%. So now what happens in Pasuk Chafei? Vayivater Yaakov levado. The Rav, and on that night, right, he's left alone. Yaakov's left alone. The Rav notes that the only fear we have is for the enemy who's anonymous. Do we know how to handle Esau? We already saw how to handle Esau. What do you do to an Esau? You give him your possessions. You give him, when we have an Esau, we know how to handle an Esau. When the enemy is anonymous, we don't know what to do. We can't size it up. Vayivater Yaakov levado. This is not Esau. He's not battling Esau. At Pasuk Chavdal, what happens here right now? Vayavor et Mavar Yavo, right? Pasuk Chafei, what happens at Pasuk Chafei at 25? A whole new story. Esau, we handled. According to Rashi, remember Rashi says, what does Yaakov do? He does three things, right? Yaakov, Devai sends gifts, prepares for war, and prays, right? He does three things in his approach to Esau. He knows how to handle Esau. This night, he goes to sleep. Who does he see? Tell me, who does he see? I don't know. Anonymous. Anonymity of the enemy is what makes us frightened beyond fright. We don't know how to handle the anonymous. And now, knowing that, take a look at how you understand what happens here. This scares us beyond scare. Vayavek ish imo. The question hovers over this story of what happens. We don't know who he is, but what does Yaakov do? What does Yaakov do in this story?
He fights him.
He fights him to no end. You might not know who he is, but you don't give up. You never give up. Judaism never gave up. The secret of Jewish history is that we never gave up, right? The question that hovers over this story is Yaakov, the Ish Tom Yoshev Ohalim, the student who sat in the tents, who was the academic, right? Who was the spiritual personality, becomes what? The warrior. How does he do it? How does he transform himself? That's the question that hovers over this whole question. Where does he get this tremendous power, this ability to become a professional warrior? The Yaakov we know was brilliant. He was a brilliant academic. He was also a brilliant economist. He was also a brilliant businessman. He had acumen that was unbelievable. He outsmarted Lavan at Lavan's business, right? He outsmarted it. That's what Jews have done over the centuries brilliantly. These people that came with nothing, right? Your father was able to start a business from scratch. And there's so many, you hear these stories, you wonder, how did they do it? Because they're Yaakovs. They're Yaakovs. They've moved to a new society and they're Yaakovs. They never gave up. Yaakov demonstrates that not logic, but heroism is what's going to be required of you. What's heroism? He's not the classical hero. The Rav points out the classical hero is grandiose figure who's able to fight, the Superman picture, right? That's not the hero. Yaakov was not impressive at all in his physical being. That's not what it is. The hero is the one who doesn't stop believing that tomorrow will be better. The Jew doesn't stop believing that tomorrow will be better. The Jew doesn't look back, he looks forward. Fascinating if you think about it. The Holocaust survivors, after the Holocaust was over, until the Eichmann trial, which was a watershed, for the first 15 years plus, they didn't talk. They had something more important to do. What did they have to do? They had to build a new future. They couldn't spend their time focusing on the past. The past, and it was horror. It was horror. It was nightmares. Oh, they had their nightmares, but they wouldn't talk about it because they knew that if you focused on looking backwards, you're not going to build the future. That's part of it. There's other parts to it too. I'm giving a very simplistic answer, but understand, I really honestly believe that they knew that they had to build a new future. And boy, did they build a new future. Boy, did they do it. We're the little midgets on top of the giants' shoulders because they built our communities. They built Eretz Yisrael. Who built Eretz Yisrael? I don't care what they tell you. It was the survivors who built Eretz Yisrael. It really was. It was unbelievable. Look at what they built. That's the story of Yaakov meeting the anonymous wrestling match on, and just let's finish up. The Rav notes, and I quote, Is this merely the story of one individual's experience? Is it not, in fact, the story of the Jewish people, Knesset Israel, an entity which is engaged in an absurd struggle for survival for thousands of years? That's what this story is all about. The story is about not one man named Yaakov. The story is about us. We see ourselves in this story. Let's finish up. Take a Kaf Yerach Yaakov, Pasuk Chav Vav. And what happens to Yaakov? He has a displacement of his hip. How is that understood? It's understood as being symbolic of the Jew as he marched through history. He marches through history, yes, limping. We lost a lot of people. We did. The struggle with the mysterious Ish extends throughout history. Continues on. Vayom, and suddenly dawn is happening. And what does the anonymous man tell us? Let me go. And what does Yaakov do? He lets him go. It's unbelievable. He does something that nobody else would do. If you're victorious, you wipe out your enemy. You totally annihilate him. Does Yaakov annihilate him? No, he doesn't. Yaakov does something that is amazing. Why does Yaakov act differently? And Rav Soloveitchik notes that Yaakov taught us that in life, victory is not the ultimate goal. We have often to retreat. It's the humbling advice that Yaakov teaches us. Victory is not what we have to attain. I'll say a point, you can argue about this politically, etc., but after the 6-Day War, Moshe Dayan pointed this out as well. And Moshe Dayan said what? He said, make sure that the enemy, and Eshkol believed this as well, make sure that your enemy doesn't feel like he's eating dirt. Make sure that it's not victory for victory's sake. Don't allow your enemy to walk off the battlefield feeling totally annihilated. And that's what Yaakov does here. He doesn't destroy Esau. He does not destroy Sarshal Esau. He doesn't destroy this anonymous enemy. Finally, and then what happens? The last verse, in verse 30, Pasuk Lamed, he says, unbelievable. Vayishal Yaakov Vayomer, and Yaakov asks this anonymous enemy, Hadida no shmecha, tell me please your name. Who are you? Vayomer lama zeh tishal bishmi. Why are you asking me my name? That's how it ends. Right? Vayivarech Sosham, and he blesses them. What's going on here? Yaakov was attacked for no apparent reason. Yaakov was left alone that night. What precipitated the attack? Why did the enemy attack Yaakov? We never know. We don't know what triggers off anti-Semitism, but they don't like what we look like. They don't like that we have a different religion what is it? What did we do to them? We're, like I said, we're better Americans than Americans. We're better Spanish than the Spanish. We're better Germans than the Germans. More German than German. What caused it? Right? And Yaakov wants to find out, at least tell me, who are you? And what does he get? What kind of answer? I cannot expose my identity. Sorry. The refusal of our attackers to identify who they are is something we experience to this very day. We don't know what makes them tick. The only thing we know is the opponent responds. What difference does it make? I hate you. I hate you. That's it. Whoever I am, the only mission I have is to defy you. And I'll tell you one other mission I have. I have the mission not to let you live in peace in Eretz Israel. You're not going to live in peace in Eretz Israel. You think you are? Remember, the story started with Yaakov telling Esau, you're in Seir, stay at home. I'm going to Eretz Israel. That's my. So what and how does this whole story end? Oh, you want peace? You're not getting peace. Two things he's told, the Rav points out. Two things he's told, and we know, we live it to this very day. We know it from our own lives that we want to understand the enemy. and we don't understand the enemy. We don't understand the enemy. We don't understand what makes them tick. Number two, we want peace. No matter how much we try to have peace, what's the answer? You're not having peace. It's just not going to be there. Silence gives the impression that we will meet again. Right? This ends. Vayomer, Hagidona Shmecha. Tell me your name. What does he answer? Vayomer. He answers, Lama Tishalish me. Why are you asking me my name? What happens next? Just tell me. What's the next comment? Silence. The end is a question. He responds with a question. What are you asking me my name for? Goodbye. I'm not telling you. I'm not giving you peace, and I'm not telling you why I hate you. So I don't know how to handle you, which is true. That is Jewish history. That is Jewish history. The Rav points out, at the turn of the 20th century, the socialist literature argued that anti-Semitism was the result of capitalism. Do you remember this? And if you know of your history, anti-Semitism, socialist. Anti-Semitism was the result of capitalism. The Jews were responsible for capitalism. If capitalism would be abolished, anti-Semitism would be abolished too. And there were Jews who believed it. The Neirischkeit. They believed it. And what did the 20th century teach us? Socialism came in, and the worst anti-Semitism came with it. We hadn't seen that kind of anti-Semitism. And how many did Stalin kill in the name of socialism? Millions and Stalin killed more than Hitler. More people. No. The 6 million were killed because there weren't that many in Russia. But Stalin killed more people than Hitler. Stalin is a more Yamach Shemo than Hitler. But Hitler did it the way Hitler did it. But Stalin did it in the Gulag. He wiped people out all the time in the name of socialism. You just remove capitalism, anti-Semitism will be. This whole story of Vayishlach is the story of Jewish history ad hayom hazeh. So what's the story? And on this we end. What is the story? How do we confront our enemy? So when we know our enemy, we know how to handle him. When we have an enemy and we know that we have to bribe him, do we bribe him? We'll give you everything we own. Just let us live in peace. The problem is we have Vayivater Yaakov Levado. Yaakov is left alone that night, and we don't know who the enemy is. But we know there's an enemy, and he attacks us, but we don't know his identity. He won't tell us who his identity is. He won't tell us what's making him tick, but he will tell us this: you're not going to have peace. And this is Jewish destiny until the Messianic time. That's what Vayishlach, that's why Chazal understood, and that's how the Rav takes you through the psukim like this. And he sees what's really going on here. It's not Yaakov and Esav, just two men wrestling against each other. It's much more than that. It's Jewish history unfolding in front of us. And it will continue this way until the Messianic period arrives. Yes?
When you say that this is an anonymous anti-Semite, but he says, I won't let you go unless you bless me. You're not asking an anti-Semite to bless you.
Yeah, you are. You're asking for the bracha. You're asking for the bracha. What's the bracha that you want? He doesn't give it. What's the bracha you want?
Peace.
You want peace. He doesn't give it. He doesn't give it. That's all you want.
And then
what's the bracha? What's a bracha? I want you. I'm teaching this in the Gemara in Tainus. You know this famous Gemara. Everybody knows this famous Gemara because it was turned into a beautiful song. Ilan, Ilan. Right? Everybody's heard the song, right? That's from the Gemara in Tanis on Daf Hey. What happens in that story? Is Rav Nachman teaching? Rav Nachman and Rav Yitzchak are chavrusas, they're Amoraim. Rav Nachman turns to Rav Yitzchak over and over in the Gemara there, one after another. Please explain to me this pasuk in Tanakh. Please explain to me this pasuk in Tanakh. Please explain to me this pasuk in Tanakh. Finally, they're parting ways. They're leaving. The chavrusa has to end, so they're leaving. So Rav Nachman turns to Rav Yitzchak, who is his source. Rav Yitzchak is the Rebbe, if you will, in this chavrusa. And Rav Yitzchak, why is Rav Yitzchak the source? Because Rav Yitzchak was the Talmud of Rav Yechanan. So Rav Yechanan had taught Rav Yitzchak. So Rav Nachman is saying, what did Rav Yechanan teach you on this pasuk? What did Rav Yechanan teach you on this pasuk? What did Rav Yechanan teach you on this pasuk? So he's going through numerous psukim. So they're ready to leave. And Rabbi Nachman turns to him, give me a bracha. So he says, I'll give you a bracha, a parable. A man is in the desert and he comes upon a tree that has water running underneath it, right? A stream, so the tree is strong. And he eats from the fruit. The fruit is delicious. He's tired and he gets the benefit of the shade of the tree. The tree is strong and he has water to drink. He says, so what do you turn to the tree? You say to the tree, how can I give you a bracha? That you have beautiful fruit? Yes, you have beautiful fruit. That you have water? Yes, you have water. That you have shade? Yes, you give shade. I can't say that. That's not my bracha. What's the point of the bracha? A bracha means status quo is not a bracha. If you have that, that's not a bracha. What's a bracha? The future. So what is the answer that he gives? He says, may your future trees, may your future progeny be blessed just like you. But what's that? That's tomorrow. That's not today. If you have everything, I can't give you a bracha. The only bracha I can give you is that your future should be beautiful. He's asking him for a bracha, not for now. He's asking for a bracha. What's the bracha?
Well, why does he ask him if he's anti-Semite? That we'll have peace?
Yeah, that we'll have peace. That's the future. I don't have it now, but I'll have it hopefully in the future. What is he answering? Sorry,
Not happening.
not giving that to you. You're not getting that. Not now, not until the Messianic age.
No, he doesn't say sorry. He says, okay, what's your name?
But that's all. What's your name? And what happens?
Yeah, but maybe that
Yaakov gets
the
his.
same thing like the parable.
You'll fight.
You think successful.
You'll be successful, but you're not going to have peace.
But it's like saying like, how can I bless? You're already blessed. Look, you were successful. It's like.
It matters. So remember what I.
And he doesn't do the next part like in the Gemara. He's just saying, I can't bless you. You're already blessed. I'm giving you the blessing by changing your name.
But your tomorrow is not going to be any better.
I know Yisrael is your tomorrow.
Well, Yisrael, you're going to fight. You're going to fight. You'll be victorious. But remember, he's so victorious, but he doesn't do something that everyone else does in a victory. What do you do when you're victorious? You wipe them out. You
Yeah,
don't wipe them out because our goal is not victory.
but was this a man or an angel? Wasn't he Esau's
Have a
guardian?
nice day.
Wasn't he Esau's guardian angel?
Is he a guardian angel? That's
Wasn't he
the
Esau's
Starshel
guardian
Esau.
angel?
That's what the Medrash says. The Torah doesn't tell you that. There's
Uh-huh. Right.
no identity at all in the Torah. The
Right.
Torah leaves that to you unanswered. That's why the Rambam says that there's no human being here. The Rambam understands it only as a prophetic vision, right? Okay.
Thank
we'll
you,
pick up
Rabbi.
next week.
Very.
Okay.
That's
Have a nice
excellent.
day.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Feel better.
Thank you.
Your deal.